Hi again. This week we are looking at the print media and the digital revolution. Basically, how media and text have evolved with communications technology into being a completely different tool, completely different platform and medium for us to access certain content. And how has that affected the way we consume media, the way we form social networks amongst our communities, and also how we take in new ideas and form certain cultural signals and basically appreciate or consume media in terms of different ideologies. So let's just go to some slides we've done here, and just be mindful that if you follow through to the whole lecture video, the last slide will just want to prompt you to start thinking about maybe a topic that you want to cover for your final essay. So how the mobile phone has altered the production of news, and there's plenty of material out there for you to consider. So let's just begin with a shared screen of the lecture notes. Okay, so I'll just move stuff around that you can hopefully see. Okay, so now we know communications technologies, as we've been talking about it for nearly how many weeks now? Maybe 6, 7, 8 weeks now. It has changed the way we access information, right? So from listening to stories, listening to ideas before the printing press was invented, to now being able to carry certain amount of information in something as small as this, or even listen to it in our Bluetooth headphones. So it's made information more mobile, and you're able to take it anywhere. So, and if some of you are the ones that are listening to the audio recordings of the readings, you know that very well, that if you're not reading on text, you're able to take it with you on your, your daily sort of routines. What is also done as a revision is sort of create connections between geographically dispersed populations. So you know that during a Zoom call, during a Zoom tutorial, we were able to connect with people all the way in Qatar, even all the way in Sri Lanka. And I've also had connections with some students who are at home in Europe because of this whole lockdown. And what is also done is construct certain types of audiences. So it could be a very local audience within the university grounds, even within a suburb that you live in, and that is differentiated by the different rituals and cultural signals that each communities have. So, excuse me, having a disruption with something, hardware like this has really changed the way we consume information, pass on information, and use it and appropriate it in our daily lives. Now, print media has been around since, I suppose, print media, when the printing presses were invented. You have read quite thoroughly about Mike Luhan's talk about the changing of behavior in how we have shifted from audio readings, audio sort of talks, to reading text, and that has shifted the way we behave. That shifted us from using more ears to more eyes to more, and also maybe making our spaces a lot more private, because we can read individually, as opposed to, say, gathering in large places to listen to rallies and stories. So it is considered as a real big change. It's moving from audio to text. Now, we know that the book has become, it's one of the first, you can say, a mass-produced commodity, a mass-produced cultural product. The book was able to spread information further, wider, sharing ideas, ideological standpoints, propaganda, influencing a wider range of audience with its reach. So it really depends on as more books and the press, as the printing presses got a bit more efficient, it gets more cheaper to print books and spread it further around. Okay, so we know that Gutenberg invented this printing press in, say, about the 15th century. It facilitates mass communication, and what you have already discovered, it really compressed the time and place. So in pre-printing press and pre a time when people were being taught to read and write, you had to gather in public rallies to listen, to be a certain community leader, a certain, or even gather around your neighborhood, gather around, women around the neighborhood, gather around to talk. So you were only limited by that space. Now, with the printing press, with printed material, that obviously has changed and changed the way we behave, from an oral culture to a reading culture to a print culture. So we know that we were able to construct different audiences on mass scale. So rather than in your neighborhood, rather than in your town hall, you were able to go across countries, across borders, to be able to spread certain messages. And these messages can be repeated again and again. Very simply put, you've seen how many reprints your favorite book might have gone through because of its popularity, and that messages can be shared again and again. And it's also made information not just something for public interest, but you could just sell information now. From reading the news. Previously, the whole digital model is a different story altogether. But previously, during the print, you had to like pay money to kind of read the news, buy a journal, buy a sheet of paper, buy a newspaper of the stands of the shops. It actually made there is a transactional value to it, and it's commodified the information. Authorship. Those of you who are freelancers, I think some of you are in this class, you know that whatever you write is create a sense of authorship and ownership and a value to what you write. And what is also done is sort of bring about the point of when you talk about authorship and ownership, you bring in the question of intellectual property. Does it now, how do you then quantify something that you've written originally? And we've seen how book authors have, made millions over a simple children's book like J.K. Rowling, but now she's in some transgender sort of controversy, so that has maybe reined it back a bit. You could see how Dan Brown's done it, who are the famous authors, George R. Martin with his latest spin-off from his Game of Thrones books. So that has made this really quite expensive. But the digital media has really thrown that out of water. It is made content rather cheap. The assumption is everyone can write and everyone can copy. So we all know that that is illegal and that is wrong, and we are not encouraged to do that. So original writing becomes quite valuable. And it's also created a readership that's spread across nations, spread across borders. So not just mainly, like I said, in your neighborhood or whatever, you've got text that goes beyond just your four walls of the house or your four walls of the town hall. So this is what the printing press has really pushed the development of literacy. It's also given a lot of knowledge to people, so it's helped educate many of us in terms of learning about other cultures, other ideologies, other skills, other people's way of life, to be able to carry things economically, socially, politically. And with that comes a notion of power. Information is power. During World War II, you can see how propaganda was spread. You can see censorship. You can see who was in control of the printing press, able to spread certain ideas to, I won't say gullible communities, but communities with only access to a particular set of information. So it comes down to also that. Now, print media typically is controlled by people with, I won't say controlled by people with money, but you've got to have the capital and the financial muscle to be able to have a printing press, really. So if you look at Malaysia, print media here has never been independent since, no, I take it back. I think print media has been pretty independent until, say, the 60s, until the racial riots in 69. And then things started to get a little bit more controlled by those in power, using race and religion as a way to control what messages were being spread to the community. So prior to that, you did have pretty free press, pretty objective press, and presses that are owned by, yes, people with financial muscle, but you still have quite autonomous text. Since then, it's also changed, you know, thanks to the advent of technology. We have seen how sites like Malaysia Kini have come up and really withstood its test of time in terms of withstanding all the obstacles it had to go through in promoting free press, free speech, and the reporting of truth, and creating awareness of issues among the reading public. But primarily, if we're looking at the Malaysian case studies, the Malaysian media is controlled by those at the time, those who in the ruling coalition had the financial muscle to push their ideas. And why would you want to do that? To seize, to maintain control by spreading of ideas, ideology, and holding on to, I suppose, the administration and power of ruling Malaysia. So we had that that's being disrupted for a while, and it's still disrupted. If you look at somewhere like Indonesia, press is very free. Somewhere like Thailand, of course, in the United States, it adopted a very Western sort of model of free press way before South Asia. But then again, you look at China and how information is spread, held by a communist government, a one-party government, and what sort of means they use to control the speech and information that spreads to their population. Okay, we can talk about that at the last slide. So what is also interesting with what print has gone through is that it's not just being a mass-produced text, but you can look at how globalization has happened, where you have local news but set in a national context. You can read local community news, but we can also engage in something that's happening in the States, or something that's happening around the superpowers in Europe. We can also engage in political shifts in how, I don't know, China trying to seize controls of their territorial waters and fighting against Philippines or Southeast Asia. So we are also aware of those issues because of the advent of such technology, print, but we are also able to tap in local news thanks to print. So you've got your local distribution of, say, flyers, newsletters, little booklets, or simply put, you're able to have that sort of occurrence happening. So globalization is another term that you can be familiar with. And you can be involved in separately. You don't have to, you can choose to be involved in local issues alone, and you could ignore global issues. But it really depends on your own consumption of media. But globalization is a term that has also happened with the advent of print. Okay, so there's a quote there by Anthony Giddens. You have seen how print media has traveled the world, and because of that, it was also the effect of that. We were also able to connect what's happening locally to what's happening globally. So you could see the effects of your neighborhood, for instance, with COVID, how it's affected your neighborhood shops, economy, people's livelihoods, even the day-to-day running of your local communities. But it's also related to something national, something international rather. The pandemic has really, effects of the pandemic has really spiraled down to what's happening just down across the road. So print media is able to bridge that. Now, a little bit of history, if you're interested. News agencies, Associated Press, Reuters, Bloomberg. I think Bloomberg came much later. I focus a lot on financial markets, but Associated Press, Reuters, even the French press, the AFP, the DP Press, the Deutsche Press, GG Press. News agencies are smaller run outfits that produce news at really quick speeds to quickly disperse information. So sometimes if you're familiar with the newsroom, you get spurts of text coming through either whatever medium you're using. In this case, we're on the internet, we're connected to cable, we're wired through the AP agency's feed. You get updates from Associated Press reporters about something happening in Kabul, something happening in Gaza, something happening, down in Singapore. So you get those very short texts, and they're very no-frills platforms, basically based on text. Sometimes they send visuals. Now they send a lot of videos as well. But back when they were invented, they were sending quick text because it's cheap, it's fast, it just gets information spread out quickly. You can call it like, using the whole telegraph technology as well. Now we've taken it with that sort of tools that you can picture in your mind, from the paper to things like news agencies. You can see how the media is also used, the print media is also used to promote a certain national identity. So again, if you're looking at a case study of where you're from, say in Malaysia, if you read the materials that come out of Malaysia, how the spread of newspapers has been used to spread a certain idea of national identity. So during National Day, you see what messages have come out on print media. During Malaysia Day, in the last few days, what messages have come out. Usually messages that promote certain level of unity and certain level of prosperity and shared values. And that's usually driven by, I think, driven by a whole notion of, in a way, trying to promote nationalism. Most countries do it, most media do it, depending on their ownership, but generally in the sense that it does adopt that whole, in a way, patriarchal, very patriotic sort of act of promoting that shared values. Particularly, I can speak about Malaysia because, you know, my experience is mainly here and in Singapore, and also a little bit of the Middle East. You have seen, like, in 1969, when we had very, very bloody racial riots here, the newspapers had to really pivot and shift towards promoting messages of unity, because there was real big clashes between races after a political rally, and it resulted in a lot of deaths, a lot of economic failures, and a lot of distrust and a lot of tension in society. So media is then used to try and unite conflicting parties. So you can call the media a social institution in that sense. Okay. So what is also interesting is when you read a newspaper or when you read a piece of news, your colleague or your neighbor who's all across the globe or even just across the block from you are able to also read the same piece of news. You may never meet her or him, or you're talking about a stranger or someone in the coffee shop. You are reading something in a cafe, the person reads the same thing. So you are part of this imagined community. But yet at the same time, in a way, you can develop a sense of unity. So news in that sense promotes that sort of practice. And people talk about how nation states are developed, and it's an idea that came up around in the 18th and 19th century Europe, and how the mass media is used to sort of send those ideas down the line to its constituents, its voters, its public. So what do you want to do with promoting nationalism? The state, if your country has a mainly state-owned media, that is what they will do to promote particular cultural values, common history, common race, maybe ethnicity. So was there a time, think about it, was there a time when newspapers were promoting white rights? Was there a time recently in 2016 in the European press, was there a pro-European narrative that's going on during the Brexit talks? Or was there in the UK, they were promoting how anti-immigration narrative? So all this is very powerful. We don't realize how it seeps into our lives, but the powers that we do use media to that detriment. Whether they're promoting truth or not, that's another question. But there are interests when you're sending out these messages using this sort of media. So what's interesting is Habermas's theory is that it creates a sense of, hopefully in ways, there's one way you can measure it, there's also polls now that do it, but how print media spreading these messages, propaganda, truth, or actual, political ideology, it makes distant people come together, or maybe they even feel there's a sense of responsibility towards each other. I can't say for me, but generally the Malaysian public, maybe, I don't know, there is a sense of apathy now. There's a political fatigue. There might be a political fatigue now in the US as well, with the whole COVID acting on the US presidential election fever. But do we feel a sense of being responsible politically for each other? Maybe you can take the example of Black Lives Matter, how mobs and mobs of people, gathering together, to try and politically correct the next person, that you cannot use the word white too much, you must always champion the black right, and if you don't follow that train of thought, you are then ostracized, demonized, or maybe even have your car set on fire, as you've seen in the Portland mayor's sort of resistance towards his stance. So at the time that is, it does seem like it's a really quite strange time we're in. It can go to the extremes if media is used that way. So there's a lot of responsibility, media owners, journalists, writers, even consumers of news, to be able to question the integrity of such information we gather. Okay, so coming back to nationalism, do you see the media that you consume, do they promote nationalism in your country? Maybe in Japan, do they do that? If you're in Singapore, if you're in Sri Lanka, how has the media been used as a tool to spread a certain sort of nationalistic ideology, that we are of the same, we speak the same language, we are part of the same religion, ethnicity, but also there is also perhaps separate political ideals. But I would want to point out that I think Indonesia does it really well in terms of language. There's, I don't know, a dozen or two political ethnicities in Indonesia, but they've managed to put forward how Indonesian is spoken as a national language. Speak to a Chinese person, a Muslim Indonesian, or even from West Papua, they all can speak Indonesian with the same accent. Why is that? So it has got to do with something, obviously education, but does everybody have access to schools? We don't know that. There's always the issue of class and accessibility and wealth, but people have access to media. So in media, either reading it, people reading it and talking about it in coffee shops, sharing it, they've managed to encourage a lot of the whole country to speak Indonesian. In Malaysia, it's a bit more it's a bit more scattered now. I think at the time, maybe pre-internet, before most of you were born, we all were told to speak Malay, and we all speak Malay frequently, fluently, and we were all taught that in school. At least 12 years of our schooling life, we were taught everything in Malay. We were able to converse. Fast forward now, is that the same with the advent of private schools, different language schools, and the very lack of any cohesion of any national identity. So, just look at best way to just think about how the print has played a role in your own national identity. Has it successfully brought people together, or has it not? Okay, so just a couple of communication terminologies. We've seen how print culture were able to sort of bring people together, but it also has made people more privatized. What do people that means? I mean, you could have more private experiences with print media, just because you're able to have a national message being read in sort of a private sphere. We're also made content a bit more individualistic. So with the internet, you can find that you're able to choose what you want to reach, see, hear. With different communications technology, you were able to really customize your access to what you consume. So has that happened now? Do you think that's happening? I think it's happening. It's definitely made it more pronounced when we have private consumption of media. What the television has brought to us, I mean, this is not print, but what the television has brought to us in the shared space when it was invented, everyone watched the same soap, everyone watched the same movie, the same series, and able to have that dialogue and conversation about the same genre and piece of cultural product. Today, that's not the case. You and I can choose what we want to watch on Netflix or download. You and I can choose what we want to listen to on Spotify, create a customized list, and then it's just really dispersed the way we communicate. So the other thing about the internet is it's kind of like really brought a lot of pieces of the media together, right? From text to video to audio. And it's also made us a part of that creation. So we are no longer recipients, we are no longer passive. I think we never were, but the internet, the communications technologies from the development of mobile phones and the use of computers have made us into creators as well. And what's interesting is I find that communications technologies also change the way we write. An example will be just receiving the messages I get from you on Discord. They're no longer very formal. They're very informal. They're very conversational. We have basically our behavior, our writing skills also has been transformed by communications technology. So you can just, see how you access print media if you ever did, because you may have been in a time where everything was digitized and you were not able to even imagine what it was like to go buy a newspaper and read it in a coffee shop. But people who were born pre-internet, people who were working pre-internet like myself and many of my colleagues, we were able to see the shift in how we behave and the languages and how much more localized and private our media consumption can be. Okay, we've come to the end of this short sort of look at the concepts surrounding print media, its history and the digitization of print content. You know that you have the essay due at the end of the semester. So just a very quick look at how then the mobile phone has really disrupted the way news is produced. News used to be produced in very linear workflows where the reporter goes out, interviews, covers the event, comes back to the office. This is pre-internet, pre-smartphones, types out the story, whether it's typewriter or computer, and then it gets sent through the workflow into the subs desk, copy desk. The editor checks it, prints it on paper, and that takes time. And there's always a deadline that takes time, and then the news gets printed the next day. How has this made it different for a news journalist to how has this made it different for news journalists to operate? So you gather the news straight away at the point. Do you send the information straight away out to the public? Its portability, has it made it cheaper for the newsroom? Is the reach wider? The sense of time has changed. We don't wait for news for the next day. We actually get it pretty instantaneously. Literally something happens, there's a bomb goes off in Lebanon. If you remember that mushroom cloud in Beirut not too long ago, and everybody thought it was an atomic bomb attack, but it was, I think, it was a fertilizer factory that went a bit haywire. We got the news pretty soon after because of the mobile phone. What type of content has the mobile phone introduced to us? Is it more diluted? Is it heavier? Is it more text? Is it more visual? So that's always really lots of things to analyze. Is it a local? Has the mobile phone made news more local now? Are we able to cover more global events with something as small as this? Style of writing, has it been easier to write? Has it been more informal? It has been the news has been made more informal. Writing for digital platforms, as an ex-reporter myself, we've been told to write more conversationally. We've always written in active voices, but sentences could be shorter. Lengths of the articles are shorter now. How has that changed the way we think, and we think of ideas and we write them down for news? Internet audiences do they have shorter attention spans because of the blue screen, because how tired it is to keep reading on the screen? Do they need more pictures, more moving pictures, or more audio to be able to capture the attention of the audience? And like we've discussed in Meyrowit's article, how has this changed the way we access public spaces? Is it seamless now? There's the distinction between what we do at our homes or within our car or within our private space here in a cafe? We can still have a private space with this tool. And how has it changed our perception of accessing a public space? So there's lots of material to look at, and how the mobile phone has disrupted the content producers in putting together news for its reading public. So that's a brief look at history of print news and how it's digitized.